Hi, this is Maginoni, and let's do a comparison to see which ones were better this week in terms of the Rebirth and the Civil Wars. So let's take a look at Rebirth first. In Rebirth number 3, we get the basic origin of the two Gotham superheroes. And of course, they tie it right into Batman's, one of his early cases, because, they can never create something new from scratch. And, for the most part, their origin seems pretty genuine. There is a little bit that we don't know about, but I guess that's a way that they can add a little extra of this, to make their origin a little bit more interesting later. Because, based on their origin, there's no way that it actually explains how they get their powers. Now, the ending of this issue is where it actually shines in the sense that, yes, we get to see and confirm Hugo Strange is the villain, but there's also somebody else involved. And that's where it gets kind of interesting. Now, overall, the art is great. The story, actually, I said, was really, pretty decent. And I'd say, as a whole, the Batman series has not lost anything since Snyder left. So, overall, I would say this was a really well done book. Now we get on to Justice League. Now, this one had your basic, let's get, world threatening beginning, and then give you the hint that something bad is coming. And something bad is already basically coming right now. The only thing I would really say about this is, there is some really good panels, there's some really good artwork throughout this whole book. And that's one of the reasons why I like it. But as a whole, I've already read this story countless times. It's basically the Justice League is spread across the world. There's something that's basically attacking, and systematically they're beating some of the heroes. And I've seen this time and time again with the Justice League. We've seen this with the Avengers. All these other X-Men. We've seen these types of stories before. So for me, it's not off to a great start. Even the villain, while there is a common thread amongst the enemy that's attacking each of the heroes, there is something a little bit different in the sense that they were able to drain the Green Lantern power rings, and then also they were able to steal the Speed Force. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to play out. Overall, though, I mean it's decent. But it's average. I mean, the art really is. I mean, it's good art. It's not Hitch's art good, but it's still good art. But it needed a little bit more, for me at least, more of a punch in terms of the story. Green Lanterns. Overall, again, this one started off as a pretty decent series, and now it's kind of just falling into the average category. These two characters, the two Green Lanterns, obviously they're never going to get along, but yet they're going to have to get along. They actually did something weird in the sense that before the rage was supposed to be permanent, but then they were actually able to remove the rage. And so that part was like, okay, now I'd like to see where that's going to lead. But, we all know nothing's really going to happen along those lines. And of course, it's like they're spreading the rage and more people are being infected. But yet we don't really see the consequences of that. But, it's one of these things that it's like, again, it's a decent storyline, but it's missing something to really grab you. And I don't know what it is. It's just something that's missing. The art is decent, but again, it just falls to not a decent average book. Okay, Superman Rebirth number 3. Basically, Superman goes to the Fortress of Solitude because he's trying to help his son, because he's basically, one moment he's invulnerable, the next minute basically he falls and he can scrape his knee, and they're trying to basically fix him because he's been hurt. Now, when they get there, they meet the Eradicator, and of course they have you're the Eradicator, so we're going to have to fight, stay away from my family nonsense. Then Superman learns that he's not really there to fight, he's basically there to help save the son. And of course, what he wants to do is pretty shocking to Superman and Lois. Now, I would say overall, this and Batman were the two of my favorite books for this out of the rebirths. They give you a little bit more history of the Eradicator in terms of how they're going to rebrand him with the rebirth, and overall, I mean, it was a decent read. They're actually they're trying to do something more with the character, I guess, in terms of the Superboy, and for that part, that I can appreciate that. And it was, like I said, for me, it was overall it was a decent read. At least, I mean, considering what Superman used to be like, this is like 100 times better than what was going on before. All right, Nova number 9, Civil War crossover. First of all, let's say, did this really succeed as a crossover? The one thing I will say is this: while Marvel's doing, I should say these 3 crossovers a little bit differently than other companies and including Marvel, have done in the past. With this one, it's more like giving you a little taste of Civil War without forcing you to buy it. Like, for an example, if all I was doing was just reading Civil War, and I didn't want to read Nova, I can buy this, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. It doesn't really impact the story. But what this thing does do is it gives you a little bit more of an insight as to what the characters are thinking. And from that aspect, I can say it succeeds, but again, it's not vital that you buy this. So that also is helpful in the sense that in terms of the big story, you don't have to buy all these other issues just to get the point. Now, in this issue here, Nova's doing this big fight in the middle of the city. Nobody's around to help him, and he ends up getting hit and thrown into a bar where he meets this guy named the Captain. And the Captain is from an older comic series called Next Wave. I would highly recommend looking that up if you haven't read that trade. Now, with this here, the Captain's very cynical, and he's basically going like, look, I don't know why you're bothering saving these people, because all it does is it leads to, more fighting, and you don't get anything back except for getting punched harder and harder each time. So why even bother? And they start talking about having a reason to fight. And this actually gives Nova, he actually really plays with Nova's mind. And especially since Nova didn't have none of his friends, the Avengers, or anybody came to help. And he basically he went to his mom and he's like, look, this is my goal, and if I can't get an answer to this, then I'm quitting. So that part was interesting, because in a sense now they're really forcing a possible ending. And by ending, I mean they're either going to end Sam as Nova, which I doubt, or they're actually going to end a story thread, which is, it needs to be done. Especially for this thing has been going on from the very beginning. There's like 2 threads of the story that have been kind of going on, and they need to at least start solving these things. Now, the art I think is pretty good overall. The story, I said I liked the story, and overall, I mean, I thought it was a pretty decent read overall. So this I liked, but it's not like what I would consider this grand issue type thing. It's a good starting point for what's to come. SpiderMan number 6. How the Civil War crossover works here is Tony basically calls Miles, and he's like, hey, we need to talk. And he basically lays it out to Miles, because, he's saying that there's a war that's going to be coming. He wants to know what side Miles is going to be on. And there's more to the topic of conversation, but that's just the gist of it. And if anything, that's a really good point in the sense where, again, it's, these are like Miles and like Miss Marvel and Nova. They're 3 of the, I guess you can say, new Marvel hopefuls of like that next wave of the next generation. And we're actually getting their input into the Civil War versus, being thrust into it without having that type of knowledge going in, and it's helping, I think, at least establish character. Like what type of person are they, and so that I actually like the way they're doing some of this stuff. Again, overall, the story is really good. The art's fantastic. We also get a little bit more about the Jessica Jones Private Eye thing, and overall, this was, for me, it was like a really, really solid read, and this is better than the regular Amazing Spider-Man, which is pretty sad, but it's on point, really good, very enjoyable, highly recommend it. The Ultimates number 9. This ties in a little bit more, but again, they do it in such a way where you can rip it right out of the story and it wouldn't really impact anything. There's two ways this is really crossing over with Civil War. One is we get to see how some of the team feels about Ulysses, and in this case, every so often, so many years, this interdimensional being attempts to come into their world, and he's going to destroy the world because of his mass. And every time he appears, they basically stop him. Well, this time Ulysses shows up, and he goes, "Hey, this is where he's going to be at." And they're actually, since they actually have more of an advance notice, they were able to prepare a little bit better for him. And so overall, I mean, it was a decent read, but the ending of this book is the key. I won't spoil the ending, but I will say this ending is it's setting the stage for the future. Like the next what's to come. So, which is better in my opinion? I think in both cases they both have some strengths. But I would have to say, in a sense, the Rebirth overall there were much better stories as a whole. But I can appreciate the way at least Marvel's doing their crossovers, at least for these 3 books. I can't. Some of these other ones are just horrendous and should be, they should be ashamed of themselves. But for at least these 3, they're fine. At least in terms of the Ultimates, I kind of felt that, we've heard this song and dance so many times, but again, I think what that is, it's because it's Captain Marvel's in this one. And even to a certain point with Miles and Nova, we already kind of knew where they were at Civil War 3. But overall, I mean, it was still, I appreciate that kind of a crossover because it doesn't truly distract from the main storyline, and it just kind of fits in. But as a whole, like I said, I think that the Rebirths did a better job overall. Anyways, if you have any comments or questions, let me know. Like, share. We'll have some more reviews later. Let me know what you guys thought between Rebirths and the Civil Wars, and we'll have some more stuff. Until next time.